Please open your eyes. Mister, Annie asked, leaning closer. Are you okay? The man did not answer. His face was red, like he had been standing too close to a fire, not lying in the cold. And the smell, Annie wrinkled her nose. It was strong, sharp, bitter. Behind her, voices approached. Hey girl, don't touch him. Annie turned. 3 people were coming up from the bus stop, a woman in a red knit hat holding a grocery bag, an older man with a cane, and a younger man with his hood up. The woman shook her head. Baby, get back. He's drunk. The younger man gave a short laugh. Yeah, real drunk. Smell that? Man's been swimming in liquor. The older man leaned forward slightly, squinting. Lord, that ain't just a drink or two. Annie looked back at the man. Now that they had said it, the smell seemed stronger. It came off his breath, heavy and sour. But his hands, they were shaking. Not just a little, shaking like he was cold. He fell, Annie said quietly. I see that. The woman replied, softer now. But you don't know him. People get mean when they wake up like that. He might be sick, Annie insisted. He's drunk, the younger man said. That's what he is. Annie shook her head. My mama says people can be more than one thing. That made the older man chuckle low in his chest. The man on the ground stirred. Caroline, he mumbled, voice slurred and thin. Don't. Annie scooted closer instead of backing away. Mister, she said louder now, please open your eyes. His eyelids didn't move. Fear crept into her chest, slow and heavy. Annie reached out and grabbed the front of his coat with both hands. It felt thick and cold under her fingers. She shook him gently. Mister? Nothing. She shook him harder. Hey, wake up. Can you hear me? Are you okay? The older man said, easy, baby. But Annie didn't stop. She tugged his coat, pulling it tighter across his chest, trying to close it the way her mother did when Annie forgot her jacket. You're cold, she said. You gotta wake up. She shook him again, this time with all the strength in her small arms. Please, open your eyes. The man gasped. His body jerked slightly, like something inside him snapped back into place. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused and glassy. For a second, he just stared at Annie, like he didn't understand where he was or why a little girl was kneeling over him. There, Annie breathed. You opened them. The man blinked slowly. What? What happened? You fell down, Annie said quickly. Are you okay? He frowned, trying to push himself up, but his arm shook and gave out. I'm fine, he muttered. Just had a little to drink. A little? The younger man repeated under his breath. The stranger gave a weak, crooked smile. Maybe more than a little. He swallowed hard. I slipped, that's all. Just lay down a minute. On the sidewalk? Annie asked. He let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but it faded fast. Not my best decision. The woman in the red hat crossed her arms. Sir, you smell like a whole bar. He didn't argue. Yeah, he admitted quietly. He tried again to sit up, pushing himself off the ground, but halfway through, his face changed. The red in his cheeks deepened, then seemed to drain unevenly. His eyes squeezed shut, and he dropped back down with a low groan. Annie's heart jumped. Mister? He didn't answer right away. His breathing grew heavier, rougher. One hand moved weakly across his chest, then down his side. What's wrong? Annie asked. He opened his eyes again, but now there was confusion there and something else. I don't know, he said hoarsely. The woman stepped closer despite herself. What do you mean you don't know? My body, he swallowed, wincing. Everything hurts. My arms, my back, legs. He shifted slightly and sucked in a breath. Feels like I got hit by something. The older man nodded slowly. You might have. That fall sounded hard. Or the cold got to him, the woman added. It's freezing out here. The younger man rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, could be the cold. Dude's been out here how long? Annie looked down at him. His hands were still shaking. His coat was open again. Without thinking, she reached down and pulled the sides of his coat together, tucking them over his chest as best as she could with her small hands. There, she said softly. That's warmer. The man looked at her, blinking slowly. "What's your name?" "Annie." "Annie," he repeated, like he was trying to remember it. "I'm Ethan." "Mr. Ethan," Annie said. "You don't look okay. I just need a minute," he insisted weakly. "No," Annie said, shaking her head. "You said that already." The older man let out a small laugh. "She got you there." The wind picked up, cutting through the street. Ethan shivered again, harder this time. Annie looked toward her house. "My house is right there," she said, pointing. "My mama's coming home. She's a nurse. She can help you." The woman hesitated. "Baby, he can't stay out here," Annie said, more firmly now. "He's too cold." The older man looked at Ethan, then at the house, then back at Annie. "She's not wrong." The younger man sighed. "Man, if he falls again while we're moving him." "He already fell," Annie said. That stopped him. Annie stood up and held out her small hands like she was in charge of something much bigger than herself. "Can you help me?" The woman in the red hat set her grocery bag down. "All right, just careful." The older man stepped forward with his cane, bracing himself. "We'll get him up slow." The younger man moved in on the other side. "Sir, you gotta help us a little." Ethan nodded faintly, though he didn't look like he had much strength. "On three," the younger man said. "1, 2. They lifted him. Ethan groaned as his weight shifted, his knees buckling for a second before they caught him under the arms. Annie stood close, holding onto the edge of his coat like she was making sure he didn't disappear. "Easy," the woman said. "Don't rush it. I'm okay," Ethan muttered again, though his voice was thin. "No, you're not," Annie said. The older man chuckled softly. "You better listen to her, son." Step by step, slowly and carefully, they began guiding him toward the small house under the buzzing porch light. Just then, headlights swept across the street. An old sedan pulled up hard to the curb. The driver's door opened before the engine fully stopped. Monica Hayes stepped out fast, her eyes already scanning the scene. "Annie," she called, moving quickly toward them. "What's going on?" Annie turned, relief flooding her face. "Mama, he fell. He said he was okay, but he's not." Monica reached them in seconds, her nurse instincts taking over before anything else. She looked Ethan up and down, took in the smell of alcohol, the unsteady posture, the red face, the trembling hands. "He's been drinking," the younger man said. "I can smell that," Monica replied calmly. "He says he just slipped," the woman added. Monica stepped closer, steadying Ethan by the arm. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" He blinked, focusing on her with effort. "Ethan Cole." Monica looked at the man again, then back at her daughter. "I know who he is," she said quietly. Then her voice turned firm again, controlled. "Annie, open the front door. Turn the heat up." Annie nodded immediately. Monica tightened her grip on Ethan's arm. "We're taking him inside." Annie ran ahead toward the house, pushing the door open wide. The moment Ethan crossed the threshold, the warmth hit him like a wall. His legs nearly gave out right there on the narrow entryway rug. "Careful," Monica said, tightening her grip under his arm. "We're not dropping you now." "I'm fine," Ethan muttered again, though the words sounded weaker each time he said them. "That's the third time you've said that," the older man with the cane replied. "Ain't been true yet." Annie stood a few steps ahead, holding the door wide open, watching every movement like she was guarding something important. "Come on," she said softly. "You almost there." They guided Ethan into the small living room. The couch was worn but clean, a folded blanket draped over the back. "Sit him down there," Monica said. The younger man and the woman in the red hat helped ease Ethan onto the couch. The moment his weight settled, he let out a long breath he didn't know he had been holding. His body slumped back, heavy and unsteady, like it no longer trusted itself to stay upright. Annie hovered near the armrest, her hands clasped together. "See? I told you couldn't stay outside." Ethan gave her a faint, tired look. "You were right. That happens a lot," the older man said with a small smile. Monica moved quickly now, her focus sharp. She pushed the coffee table aside with her foot, then crouched in front of Ethan. Her fingers pressed lightly against his wrist, counting. Then she reached up, touching his forehead, his neck, his cheeks. "You're still too warm," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "And shaking. I told you." It's just the alcohol, Ethan said. Though his voice wavered, Monica shook her head once. Alcohol doesn't make your whole body ache like that unless something else is going on. She looked him straight in the eye. When did you fall? I don't know. He frowned, trying to think. I was walking. Then I slipped. I think maybe 10 minutes. Maybe more. Did you hit your head? I don't. He paused, winced slightly. I don't remember. That's not a good answer, Monica said calmly. The woman in the red hat shifted her weight. You want us to stay? Monica glanced at her, then nodded. Just for a minute. Annie climbed onto the edge of the couch, careful not to get too close, but close enough to keep watching him. Mr. Ethan, she said quietly, you still feel bad? He let out a slow breath. Yeah, I do. Where? She asked. He closed his eyes briefly. Everywhere. The younger man rubbed his hands together. Could be the cold finally catching him. Dude's been out there long enough. Or he twisted something when he fell, the woman added. Monica stood and walked quickly toward the kitchen. Annie, get me a towel, the clean one from the chair. Annie jumped down immediately. Yes, ma'am. Ethan leaned his head back against the couch. His arms ached. His back throbbed. Even his fingers felt stiff. Like they didn't belong to him. I didn't think it would be this cold, he said quietly. No one does, the older man replied. That's why it gets people. Monica came back with a small bottle of oil and the towel Annie handed her. She set them on the table and turned back to Ethan. I'm going to help warm you up and get your circulation going. You just sit still. He gave a faint, confused look. You're not taking me to a hospital? Not yet, Monica said. Right now you can't even stand on your own. We stabilize first, then decide. Monica moved behind him, guiding him to lean slightly forward. You're going to feel this, she said. It might sting a little. Ethan clenched his jaw at first, then slowly his breathing began to change. Not better exactly, but different, deeper, less panicked. Stay with me, Monica said. No drifting off. I'm not, he started, but the sentence faded halfway. Annie leaned closer again. Hey, she said softly. No sleeping. Ethan opened his eyes, just enough to see her small face in front of him. You don't give up, do you? She shook her head. No, that's good, the older man said. Somebody's got to keep you awake. After a few minutes, Ethan's shivering eased slightly. His shoulders dropped, just a little. Monica stepped back around in front of him, studying his face. Better? He nodded slowly. A little. Good. That means your body's responding. The younger man let out a breath. All right. Looks like you got this. The woman in the red hat picked up her grocery bag. You take care now, baby, she said to Annie. And you, she added, looking at Ethan. Maybe next time don't fight your wife and walk home drunk in winter. Ethan almost smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Noted, the older man tapped his cane once on the floor. You got lucky tonight. Ethan looked toward Annie. I know. One by one, the neighbors stepped out, the door closing behind them with a soft click. The house grew quieter, the outside world fading back into the cold night. For a moment, no one spoke. Annie climbed back onto the couch, sitting carefully beside him. You're not shaking as much, she observed. Feels like I got run over instead, Ethan said. That's still better than freezing, Annie replied. Monica crossed her arms, watching both of them. Her face was calmer now, but there was something else in her eyes, too. She looked at the phone Annie had placed on the table earlier. The screen lit up again, vibrating softly. Name after name appeared. Calls, messages, urgency. Monica picked it up, glanced at the screen, then looked back at the man sitting in her living room. Mr. Cole, she said quietly. You've got a lot of people looking for you. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again, heavier this time. Yeah, he said. I figured. If that moment made you feel something, hit like and tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Monica held the phone in her hand a second longer before setting it back down on the table, screen still glowing with missed calls. The light flickered across Ethan's face, catching the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes followed the phone, without really focusing on it. They don't sound patient, she said. They're not, Ethan replied quietly. Annie tilted her head. Is it your family? Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. Some of it. Mostly people who work for me. They worried about you? Annie asked. He gave a faint, tired smile. In their own way, Annie didn't fully understand that answer, but she didn't push. Instead, she looked down at his hands again. They were still trembling, just not as violently. You're still shaking, she said. I know, he murmured. Monica stepped closer, watching him carefully. Any dizziness? A little. Chest pain? He paused. Not sharp, just heavy. Head? Feels like I hit something, but I don't remember it. Monica nodded slowly. That's what concerns me. Ethan let out a breath. You always this direct? Yes, she said. People don't get better from soft guesses. Annie swung her legs gently off the edge of the couch. Mama doesn't like guessing games. I can see that, Ethan said. For a moment, the room settled into a strange quiet. The kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Ethan looked around again. Really looked this time. The walls held framed pictures, some slightly crooked, some faded. Annie at different ages, smiling wide. Monica, in a uniform, standing beside other nurses. A small drawing taped near the door, probably Annie's, with uneven letters spelling something about home. Nothing in the room matched. Nothing was expensive, but everything belonged. His phone buzzed again. Monica glanced at it but didn't pick it up this time. You going to answer that? Ethan stared at it, then shook his head slightly. Not yet. Someone might be worried. They are, he said. But if I answer right now, I won't be here anymore. Annie frowned. What do you mean? He looked at her, then at Monica. It becomes a situation. People show up, questions, decisions. Everything moves fast. He paused. Too fast. Monica studied him for a moment. And you don't want that? Not like this, he said. Annie leaned a little closer. You want to stay here? Ethan met her eyes. For a second, he looked like he didn't know how to answer honestly. Then he said, I think I need a few more minutes before the world finds me. Annie nodded like that made perfect sense. Monica didn't answer right away. She crossed her arms again, thinking, You don't get to disappear completely, she said after a moment, but you can have a few minutes, on one condition. Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. What's that? You listen to me, she said. No arguing. If I say we call for help, we call. He nodded. Fair. Annie smiled faintly, like a small agreement had just been signed in her living room. Ethan shifted on the couch, then immediately winced. Yeah, that's not good. Where? Monica asked. Lower back. Shoulder too. He rolled his neck slightly and stopped halfway. And my head doesn't like moving. You probably hit the ground harder than you remember, Monica said. Your body's catching up to it now. Feels like it, he muttered. Annie reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the sleeve of his coat. Does it hurt a lot? He looked down at her small hand. Enough, she nodded seriously. When I fell off my bike, it hurt like that. Mama said my body was mad at me. Ethan let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. That sounds about right. My body gets mad too when I don't listen, Annie added. Monica gave her a look. That's often. Annie smiled a little. Ethan's eyes drifted closed for a second. Hey, Annie said quickly. No sleeping. He opened them again, slower this time. You're serious about that, huh? Yes, she said. You already tried that outside. Didn't work. Monica stepped closer, watching his face carefully. Stay with us, Mr. Cole. I'm here, he said, though his voice had softened. Another buzz from the phone. This time Monica picked it up again, glanced at the screen, and let out a quiet breath. Your wife? Ethan's expression changed, just slightly. Yeah, she's called 6 times in the last few minutes. I'm not surprised. Annie looked between them. You should tell her you're okay. Ethan rubbed his face slowly, wincing again as his shoulder protested. I will. When? Annie asked. He looked at her, then at the phone. Soon. Monica handed it to him. Soon should be now. He hesitated, then took it. For a moment, he just stared at the screen. The name. The missed calls. The life waiting on the other side of that connection. Then he pressed call. It rang once, twice. Caroline answered before the third. Ethan? Her voice came through sharp, tight with worry and anger all tangled together. Where are you? Ethan swallowed. I'm okay. You're not okay, she snapped. Your driver said you never called him. Your assistant's been trying to reach you. Where are you? Ethan glanced around the small living room, the couch, the table, Annie watching him like he mattered. Monica standing steady and calm. I'm somewhere safe, he said. Safe where? He hesitated. Annie leaned closer, whispering, Tell her you're not on the sidewalk anymore. Ethan almost smiled. I'm not on the sidewalk anymore. There was a pause on the other end. What does that mean? It means I fell, he said quietly, and someone helped me up. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you hurt? Caroline asked, her voice softer now. A little. Do I need to come get you? Ethan looked at Monica. She met his gaze evenly. If you're going to leave, you leave on your feet, not carried out because you waited too long. He nodded slightly, then spoke into the phone. Yeah. You should come. Send me the address. Ethan looked at Annie. She gave it proudly. Number by number. Like it was something important. Caroline repeated it back, then said, I'm on my way. The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Annie looked at him. See, that wasn't so bad. He nodded. No, it wasn't. Monica stepped back slightly, though her eyes stayed on him. Good. Now we wait. For what? Annie asked. For the next part, Monica said. Ethan leaned back carefully against the couch, his body still aching, his head still heavy, but something inside him quieter now. Not fixed, not even close, but steadier than it had been on that cold sidewalk, and for the first time that night, he wasn't alone when he felt it. The house grew quieter after the call ended, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one carried weight, like everyone in the room understood that something else was on its way. Annie sat cross-legged beside Ethan, watching him the way children watch things they don't fully understand but care about anyway. Monica stood near the edge of the room, arms loosely folded, her attention never drifting far from him. Ethan rested his head back again, more carefully this time. The pain in his body hadn't disappeared, but it had settled into something steadier, something he could measure instead of fear. His shoulder throbbed when he moved it. His back ached like he had fallen down a flight of stairs instead of a single sidewalk. Even his ribs felt sore when he took a deep breath. You still with us? Monica asked. He opened his eyes. Yeah, good. Stay there. Annie tilted her head. You look less red now. That's a good sign, Monica said, his body starting to regulate. Ethan let out a slow breath. That's comforting. It should be, she replied. Means you're not getting worse. There was a knock at the door. Not loud, not aggressive, but not uncertain either. Annie jumped slightly, then looked at Monica. That her? Monica glanced at Ethan. He nodded once. Yeah. Monica walked to the door but didn't open it right away. She looked back once more, making sure Ethan was still upright, still conscious. Then she unlocked it and pulled it open. Caroline Cole stood on the porch, her coat wrapped tightly around her, hair slightly out of place like she had rushed more than she wanted to admit. Behind her, a car idled at the curb, headlights cutting through the dark street. For a brief second, she didn't step inside. Her eyes moved quickly. Monica, the small house, the worn furniture, and then Ethan on the couch. Ethan, she said, and everything else in her voice disappeared except that one word. I'm here, he answered. She walked in immediately. The shift in the room was instant. Caroline carried a different kind of presence, not loud, not harsh, but sharp, controlled, used to being in spaces where things moved according to her expectations. That control cracked just slightly when she reached the couch. She stopped in front of him, looking down, taking in the red in his face, the way he held his side, the faint tremor still running through his hands. What happened to you? She asked, softer now. I told you, he said. I fell. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head. You disappeared, Ethan. You didn't call anyone. You didn't answer your phone. I know. That's not something you just know. That's something you don't do. Monica stepped forward slightly, her tone calm but firm. He was outside in the cold, disoriented. Your husband's lucky my daughter saw him when she did. Caroline turned, really seeing Monica for the first time. Then Annie. Her expression shifted again, this time into something harder to read. Your daughter? Annie raised her hand a little. Hi. Caroline blinked, just once. Hi. Ethan looked between them. Annie found me. She wouldn't let me sleep out there. Caroline's eyes moved back to Annie. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, quietly, thank you. Annie nodded like it was no big deal. You're welcome. Monica gestured toward Ethan. He's still not stable enough to be moving around much. He needs to sit, stay warm, and be monitored. Caroline straightened slightly, instinctively stepping into a role she knew well. We can take him to a private clinic. Monica didn't argue, but she didn't step back either. You can, but right now, he's just gotten his body to settle. Moving him too fast could make things worse. Caroline looked at Ethan. Can you stand? He tried to shift again, and the answer came in the form of a sharp wince. Not well. That's what I thought, Monica said. Caroline pressed her. Annie broke it. You can stay a little, she said to Caroline. Until he's not shaking anymore. Caroline looked down at her, surprised by the simplicity of it. Ethan let out a faint breath. She's been running this situation all night. I can see that, Caroline replied. Annie smiled just a little. Caroline moved to the other side of the couch and sat down, careful not to jostle Ethan too much. For the first time since she walked in, she didn't look like she was about to take over. She just sat there, close enough that her shoulder almost touched his. You smell like a bar, she said quietly. Ethan let out a small, tired laugh. I've been told. You scared me. I know. She didn't respond to that right away. Instead, she looked around the room again. Not with judgment this time, but with something closer to awareness. The kind of awareness that came when a place didn't match the world you were used to, but still held something you couldn't ignore. Monica watched the two of them for a moment, then stepped back slightly, giving them space but not leaving entirely. He needs to keep talking, she said. No falling asleep yet. Caroline nodded. All right. She looked at Ethan again. Talk to me. He exhaled slowly. About what? About why you thought walking home drunk in winter was a good idea. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, meeting her gaze. It wasn't. No, she said. It wasn't. Annie looked between them, then leaned closer to Ethan again. You said you just laid down for a minute. I did. That was a bad minute, she said. Ethan nodded. Yeah, it was. Caroline glanced at Annie, then back at Ethan. You're lucky that minute didn't turn into something worse. I know, he said again, softer this time. Monica stepped forward once more, checking his pulse again, her movements steady and practiced. You're stabilizing, she said. Still sore, still weak, but better than when you came in. Caroline looked up. How long before he can move? Depends, Monica replied. On whether his body keeps cooperating. Ethan let his head rest back again, careful, controlled. The pain was still there. The exhaustion too. But something else had settled in alongside it. Not comfort. Not yet. But a kind of stillness he hadn't felt in a long time. Annie rested her chin lightly on the edge of the couch, looking up at him. You didn't open your eyes at first, she said. I know. I thought you wouldn't. He looked down at her. But I did. She nodded. Yeah. Caroline watched that exchange quietly, something unreadable passing through her expression. Outside, the cold night went on like nothing had changed, but inside that small house, under the hum of an old radiator and the watchful eyes of a child who refused to look away, something had already begun to shift. Caroline stayed seated beside Ethan, but her posture had softened in a way that hadn't been there before. One hand rested lightly near his arm, not quite touching, as if she wasn't sure whether he would pull away or lean into it. Annie watched the space between them like it meant something important. Monica moved quietly around the room, adjusting the thermostat, checking the window latch, doing small things that made the house feel steadier. But her eyes kept returning to Ethan, measuring, observing, never fully at rest. You still feeling that heaviness? She asked. Ethan nodded faintly. Yeah, not as sharp, but still there. That's expected, Monica said. Your body's coming down from stress, alcohol, and cold all at once. It doesn't reset instantly. Caroline glanced at her. Is that dangerous? It can be, Monica answered. Depends on how he handles the next hour. Ethan let out a quiet breath. No pressure. Annie leaned closer again, resting her elbows on the couch cushion. You didn't listen to your body, she said. He looked at her. No. I didn't. My mama says when you don't listen, your body talks louder. Ethan gave a small, tired smile. That sounds about right. Caroline's eyes flickered between them, something thoughtful settling behind her usual composure. She's been taking care of you all night? Monica answered before Annie could. She found him first. She didn't walk away. Caroline looked at Annie again, longer this time. Most people would have. Annie shrugged slightly. He looked like he needed help. Ethan's gaze dropped for a second. I did. The room fell quiet again, but not empty. It felt like something was building beneath the surface. Not loud, not obvious. Just present. Caroline shifted, her hand finally settling against Ethan's sleeve, steady but careful. You scared me tonight, she said, not accusing this time, just stating it. Ethan nodded slowly. I scared myself. That's new, she replied. He didn't argue. Monica stepped closer again, crouching slightly in front of him. Try to stand now, she said. Slowly. I want to see if your balance is coming back. Caroline tensed. Is that safe? That's why I'm right here, Monica said. Ethan placed his hands on the edge of the couch, pushing himself up carefully. His body resisted at first, stiff and sore, but he managed to rise. For a moment, he stood there, unsteady but upright. Annie clapped her hands once, softly. You did it. Ethan let out a breath. Barely. Stay there, Monica said. Don't rush. He took a small step. His leg wobbled, but he caught himself. Better, Monica noted. Still weak, but better. Caroline stood as well, instinctively ready to support him. We can get him to the car now. Monica didn't answer immediately. She watched Ethan take another slow step, then another. Each one was steadier than the last, but not strong enough to trust without caution. Maybe, Monica said, but not fast, not careless. Ethan sat back down after a few seconds, exhaling deeply. That's enough for now. Annie tilted her head. You tired again? Yeah, he admitted. No sleeping, she reminded him. He looked at her, amused despite everything. You're not letting that go, are you? No. Caroline let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. She's not wrong. Ethan leaned back, careful again. His eyes moved slowly around the room once more. The small table, the worn couch, the drawing near the door, Annie's crayons still scattered where she had left them before everything changed. This place, he said softly, almost to himself. Monica raised an eyebrow. What about it? He paused, searching for the right words. It feels real. Caroline looked at him, surprised. Real? Yeah. He glanced at her, then back at the room. Not staged. Not controlled. Just real. Annie smiled a little. It's just our house. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Caroline looked around more carefully this time. Not just seeing, but noticing. The small details. The way everything was used. Not displayed. The way Annie moved freely, without hesitation, without asking permission for every little thing. You helped him without knowing who he was, she said quietly to Monica. Monica met her gaze. He didn't look like someone who needed to be left outside. Caroline hesitated. Even if he had been difficult? Monica's expression didn't change. Being difficult doesn't mean you stop being human. That landed harder than anyone expected. Ethan looked down at his hands. I've been called worse than difficult. Annie frowned. Why? He let out a slow breath. Because sometimes I forget things. Like what? He glanced at Monica, then back at Annie. Like what matters? Annie thought about that for a second, then nodded like she understood more than she said. That happens. Caroline studied him quietly, something shifting again in her expression. Not just concern now. Something deeper. Recognition. Maybe. Monica stood up straight again. All right, she said. Here's where we are. He's stable enough to move, but not strong enough to rush. If you take him, you do it carefully. No sudden movements. No stress. Caroline nodded. We can manage that. Ethan looked at Annie. Sounds like I'm being handed off. You are, Annie said, but you gotta remember something. He raised an eyebrow slightly. What's that? She pointed at him, serious now. No more sleeping on sidewalk. For the first time that night, Ethan laughed. Not a tired breath, not a quiet exhale, but a real, short laugh that surprised even him. Deal, he said. Caroline helped him stand again, this time more carefully, her hand steady on his arm. Monica stayed close on the other side, watching every step. As they moved toward the door, Ethan paused. He looked back, at Annie, at Monica, at the small living room that had held him together when everything else had come apart. I don't know how to thank you, he said. Monica didn't answer right away. Annie did. You already said thank you, she said. Now you just gotta remember it. Ethan nodded slowly. I will. And for once, it didn't sound like something he said out of habit. It sounded like something he meant. The cold air rushed back the moment the door opened, slipping into the warm room like it had been waiting outside all along. Ethan felt it immediately, a sharp contrast against the heat his body had only just begun to recover. His steps slowed on instinct, and Caroline tightened her hold on his arm without saying a word. Easy, Monica said from the other side. Don't let the temperature shock hit you too fast. I'm trying, Ethan muttered, though the effort showed in the tightness of his jaw. Annie stood just inside the doorway, small hands gripping the edge of the door as she watched them. The porch light buzzed above, casting a soft yellow glow over everything: the worn steps, the quiet street, the dark sky that seemed colder now than it had before. You okay? She asked. Ethan paused, looking back at her. For a second, the world outside the car, the waiting driver, the life he belonged to faded behind the simple question. I will be, he said. Annie nodded. Like that was enough for now. Caroline guided him carefully down the steps. Each movement was slower than someone like Ethan would have ever allowed in his normal life. There were no rushed instructions, no impatient gestures, just careful steps, steady breathing, and the quiet understanding that one wrong move could undo everything that had been held together inside that house. The car door opened before they reached it. A man in a dark coat stepped out quickly, his posture straight, his expression tense. Mr. Cole, he started, then stopped when he saw Ethan's condition. I'm fine, Ethan said automatically. The driver didn't respond to that. He looked at Caroline instead. He's not, she said calmly. Monica stepped back onto the porch, arms folded again, watching the transition without interfering. Annie stood beside her now, half hidden behind her leg, still observing everything. Thank you, Caroline said, turning slightly toward Monica. Monica gave a small nod. Just make sure he doesn't decide to walk home again. Caroline almost smiled. That won't happen twice. Ethan looked up at the porch one more time. Annie met his eyes and gave a small wave. Not dramatic, not emotional, just simple, like she expected to see him again. He lifted his hand slightly in return. Then he was guided into the car. The door closed. The warmth inside the vehicle was different from the house. Controlled, quiet, the kind of silence that came with leather seats and tinted windows, and a world that ran on schedules and expectations. Ethan leaned back slowly, exhaling as his body adjusted again. The movement pulled at his shoulder, sending a dull ache through his back. But it was manageable now. Manageable felt like a victory. Caroline sat beside him, watching him without speaking at first. The car pulled away from the curb. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. Then Caroline spoke. You disappeared into a neighborhood you've probably never driven through, let alone walked in. Ethan didn't deny it. Yeah. And a 6-year-old found you. Yeah. She looked at him more directly. And took better care of you than you took of yourself. He let out a slow breath. Also, yeah. That should have been sarcasm, it wasn't. Caroline leaned back slightly, studying him. Something changed. Ethan stared ahead through the windshield. The streetlights passed in quiet intervals, each one briefly lighting his face before fading again. I think I just noticed something I've been ignoring. he said. What? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he thought about the small living room, the uneven warmth, the way Annie refused to let him close his eyes, the way Monica never once treated him like he was more important than anyone else who had ever needed help. People, he said finally. Caroline frowned slightly. That's a broad realization. I know. He glanced at her. But it's specific too. She waited, but he didn't explain further. The car turned onto a wider road, leaving the quiet neighborhood behind. Back on the porch, Annie was still standing at the door long after the car disappeared. You can close it now, Monica said gently. Annie didn't move right away. He's gonna be okay, right? Monica looked out at the empty street, then down at her daughter. He has a better chance now than he did an hour ago. Annie nodded slowly, processing that. He looked different at the end, she said. How? Not just sick. Annie tilted her head, searching for the right word. Like, he was thinking. Monica smiled faintly. That's usually a good sign. Annie stepped back inside, and Monica closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold once more. Inside the car, Ethan shifted slightly, adjusting his position. You should still see a doctor, Caroline said. I know, and not one you cancel on because you feel better in the morning. I know. She studied him again. You're agreeing too easily. I don't have the energy to argue, he said. That's not it. He didn't respond. Caroline looked out the window for a moment, then back at him. That girl told you to keep your eyes open. Ethan's lips curved faintly. She was very serious about that. And now? He glanced at her. Now I think I understand what she meant. Caroline didn't ask him to explain. She just nodded once. The car continued forward, carrying them back toward a world that hadn't changed at all. But something inside Ethan had, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't try to ignore it. The house felt quieter than it had all night. Not empty, just settled. Annie sat at the edge of the couch, her small fingers tracing the faint marks left on the fabric where Ethan had been sitting. The warmth he left behind had already begun to fade, but she still pressed her hand there like she was checking if it mattered. He said he'd remember, she said softly. Monica was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup under slow-running water. People say a lot of things when they're tired, she replied. Annie looked up. You don't think he will? Monica didn't answer right away. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands, then leaned against the counter. I think sometimes people mean it when they say it. The question is whether they still mean it when things go back to normal. Annie frowned slightly. What's normal for him? Monica gave a small, knowing breath. Very different from us. Annie looked back at the couch. He didn't act like it. No, Monica said. Tonight he didn't. Across the city, the car slowed as it turned into a wide, gated driveway. The house ahead stood tall and perfectly lit, every window glowing evenly, every line sharp and clean like it had been measured twice before being built. The gate opened before the car fully stopped. Ethan barely noticed. His head rested back, eyes open but distant, following something that wasn't in the car anymore. We're home, Caroline said quietly. He nodded, but didn't move. The driver stepped out, opening the door, but waited when Ethan didn't immediately respond. Caroline touched his arm. Come on. Ethan shifted slowly, the familiar ache in his body reminding him he wasn't imagining the night. When he stood, the ground felt steadier than before, but not strong, not certain. Inside, the house was silent. No humming radiator, no scattered crayons, no uneven warmth, just quiet. Perfect, controlled quiet. Ethan stepped in, then paused. For a second, it felt colder inside than it had outside. Caroline watched him carefully. What is it? He shook his head. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the absence of something he hadn't known he needed until he lost it. They moved into the living room. Everything was in place, cushions straight, surfaces clear, no sign that anything had ever been out of order. Caroline turned on a lamp, though the overhead lighting had already filled the room. You should sit, she said. Ethan lowered himself onto the couch. It was softer than Monica's, smoother, more expensive. And yet, something about it felt distant. Caroline stood in front of him. I'm calling the doctor. I'll go in the morning, he said. She shook her head. No, tonight. I'm not going back out. He can come here. Ethan exhaled slowly. Fine. Caroline stepped away to make the call. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for just a second, then opened them again immediately. No sleeping. The words came back to him, clear and firm, spoken in a small voice that refused to be ignored. He let out a quiet breath. Still listening, huh? He murmured to himself. His phone buzzed again. This time, not urgent calls. Messages. Updates. Questions from people already trying to piece together where he had been. He stared at the screen, then turned it face down on the table. For once, the world could wait. Back in the small house, Annie had finally changed into her pajamas, though she moved slower than usual, still thinking. Mama? She called from the hallway. Yeah? Do you think he has a kid? Monica paused, then smiled faintly. Why do you ask that? Annie shrugged, though her mother couldn't see it. Just wondering. Monica walked to the doorway. Maybe. Why? Annie looked down at her hands. I think if he does, they'd want him to come home safe. Monica's expression softened. That's a good thought. Annie nodded, satisfied with that, and climbed into bed. In the large house across the city, Ethan sat in silence long after Caroline finished her call. The doctor was on his way. The world was slowly returning to its place around him, but something didn't fit the way it had before. Caroline came back into the room. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Ethan nodded. She hesitated, then sat across from him. You're different. He looked up. I feel different. That's not what I meant. He waited. Caroline studied him. You didn't try to control anything tonight. Not me. Not the situation. Not even how you looked. Ethan let out a quiet breath. I didn't have the energy. No, she said. You had the opportunity. That sat between them. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You ever notice how easy it is to ignore things when they're not right in front of you? Caroline crossed her arms loosely. That depends on what you're ignoring. People, he said. She didn't answer immediately. I walked through places like that neighborhood before. He continued. Driven past. Invested near them. Talked about them like they were numbers. And tonight? She asked. Tonight, he said slowly. A 6-year-old wouldn't let me close my eyes on a sidewalk. Caroline's gaze shifted, just slightly. And her mother, he added, didn't care who I was. She just saw someone who needed help. Caroline leaned back. That's what people are supposed to do. Ethan nodded. Yeah. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something new, something neither of them rushed to name. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Inside, Ethan Cole sat in a room that had everything he had ever worked for, and for the first time, he understood that something important had been missing from it all along. The doctor arrived exactly 23 minutes later. Ethan noticed because he was still awake, still watching the second hand on the clock move in slow, deliberate circles. He hadn't closed his eyes again, not fully. Every time they drifted, a small voice in his head pulled them back open. No sleeping. The door opened, footsteps followed, and then a calm, practiced voice filled the room. Mr. Cole? Ethan turned his head slightly. That's me. The doctor stepped closer, already assessing before he even asked the first question. I hear you had a fall. That's one way to put it, Ethan replied. Caroline stood nearby, arms folded but no longer tense. He was found outside, disoriented, cold. He's been drinking. The doctor nodded, not surprised. All right. Let's take a look. What followed was routine, efficient, and clinical. Blood pressure, pulse, eyes, reflexes, questions about dizziness, memory, pain. Ethan answered what he could, admitted what he couldn't remember. Any loss of consciousness? The doctor asked. Ethan paused. I don't think so, Caroline spoke quietly. He was out long enough not to answer his phone. The doctor made a small note. We'll assume there may have been a brief lapse. He stepped back after a few minutes, considering. You're lucky, he said plainly. Ethan let out a breath. That's what everyone keeps saying. You're not concussed beyond mild concern. But you took a hard fall. Your body's reacting to alcohol, cold exposure, and physical impact all at once. That's why everything feels heavy and sore. That part I noticed, Ethan muttered. You'll recover, the doctor continued, but you need rest, hydration, and no more poor decisions for at least a few days. Caroline almost smiled at that. Ethan nodded. Understood. The doctor packed up calmly. Someone got you inside before things got worse. That made the difference. Ethan didn't answer right away. I know, he said after a moment. The doctor left as quietly as he came, the door closing behind him with a soft finality that seemed to mark the end of something, or maybe the beginning. Caroline turned back toward Ethan. You heard him. Yeah, you're staying home tomorrow. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. She studied him again. That's new. He didn't respond. The room fell into silence once more, but this time it didn't feel heavy. Just open. Caroline moved closer, sitting on the arm of the chair near him. You keep looking like you're somewhere else. Ethan rested his elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped. I am. Where? He didn't hesitate this time. That house. Caroline nodded slowly. I thought so. It wasn't anything special, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Just a small place, worn, a little cold in spots, loud pipes. And? He looked up at her. It felt alive. Caroline didn't argue. She kept telling me not to close my eyes, he continued. Like it was the most important thing in the world. She might have been right, Caroline said. Ethan gave a faint smile. She usually was. Caroline tilted her head slightly. Usually? She didn't let anything slide. Every time I tried to say I was fine, she called it out. He paused. No hesitation. No fear. That's rare, Caroline said. Yeah. Silence again, but this time it carried something warmer. Ethan leaned back slowly, careful of the soreness in his body. His eyes moved toward the window, where the city lights stretched far beyond what he could see clearly. I've spent years making decisions about places like that, he said. Caroline didn't interrupt. Where to build, where to invest, what's worth more, what's worth less. He exhaled slowly. I've never once asked what it feels like to actually live there. Caroline crossed her arms lightly. That's not entirely true. It is, he said. I've asked numbers, not people. She considered that. And tonight? She asked. Tonight, he said quietly. I didn't have a choice. Caroline's gaze softened. Just a fraction. Sometimes that's the only way people learn. Ethan nodded. His phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up. Caroline watched him, curious. He didn't open the messages. Instead, he scrolled past them, found something else, then stopped. What are you doing? She asked. He looked at the screen, then back at her. Trying not to forget. Forget what? He hesitated. Then, slowly, he stood. Caroline moved immediately to steady him, but he waved her off gently. I'm okay. You said that before. I mean it a little more now. He walked carefully, slower than usual toward the large window overlooking the city. The lights below stretched endlessly, buildings rising in clean lines, everything ordered, predictable, controlled. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he said, almost to himself, she thought sidewalks were too cold for sleeping. Caroline blinked. What? He glanced back at her, a faint smile touching his face. That's what she said. Caroline didn't reply right away. Ethan turned back to the window. She wasn't wrong. The room stayed quiet, but something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to matter. And far across the city, in a small house with a buzzing porch light and a worn couch, Annie Hayes slept peacefully, unaware that the man she had refused to let close his eyes was now wide awake in a way he hadn't been in years. The morning came quietly, not the kind of morning that rushed in with alarms and meetings and schedules already waiting at the door. This one arrived slowly, pale light slipping through tall windows, settling across the polished floors and untouched furniture. Ethan was already awake. He hadn't slept much. Not because of pain, though that was still there. A dull reminder in his back and shoulders, but because his mind refused to settle. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing again. A small girl, on a cold sidewalk, shaking his coat, refusing to let him disappear. Please open your eyes. He sat at the edge of his bed now, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might answer something he hadn't yet figured out. A soft knock came at the door. "Yeah," he said. Caroline stepped in, already dressed, composed, but not distant the way she sometimes was in the mornings. "You're up. Didn't really sleep." "I figured." She walked in further, stopping a few steps away. "How do you feel?" Ethan shifted slightly. The soreness was still there, but clearer now, easier to understand. "Like I fell on concrete." "That's accurate." He nodded once. "But better." Caroline studied him for a moment. "You don't look like you're thinking about the fall." "I'm not." "I know." She waited. Ethan finally looked up at her. "I keep thinking about that house." Caroline didn't seem surprised. "I thought you might." "It wasn't anything like this," he said, gesturing slightly around the room, but it didn't feel like it was missing anything either. Caroline crossed her arms loosely. "That's because nothing in it was pretending to be something else." Ethan let out a quiet breath. "Yeah." There was a pause. Then Caroline asked, "What are you going to do about it?" He frowned slightly. "About what?" "About the fact that it's still in your head this morning." That landed. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stood slowly, testing his balance. Still sore, still stiff, but steady enough. "I don't know yet," he admitted. Caroline nodded. "That's honest. I just know I don't want it to be one of those things I forget in a week." "Then don't," she said simply. He looked at her again, more carefully this time. "You think it's that easy?" "No," Caroline replied. "I think it's that simple. Not the same thing." That stayed with him. Downstairs, the house was already moving. Staff quiet, efficient, everything in place. Coffee waiting. News running softly on a screen. Messages stacking up again. Ethan walked past all of it. His phone buzzed in his hand. Meetings, updates, decisions waiting for him to step back into the version of himself that had existed before last night. He didn't stop walking. Caroline followed, watching him without interrupting. "Where are you going?" she finally asked. He reached for his coat, slower this time, mindful of his shoulder. "Out. You just got back in one piece." "I know. And now you're leaving again?" He looked at her. "I'm not going far." Caroline held his gaze for a second, then nodded once. "You're going back." It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't deny it. The drive felt shorter in the daylight. The same streets looked different now. Less shadow. More detail. Buildings he would have ignored before now seemed present. People walking, carrying bags, talking, living lives he had never needed to notice. The car slowed as it turned onto the familiar block. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "There," he said. The driver pulled over. Ethan stepped out carefully, the morning air cool but not as harsh as the night before. The house looked smaller in daylight. Simpler. The porch light now off, replaced by soft sunlight across the steps. For a moment, he just stood there. Then he walked up and knocked. Inside, Annie was at the small table, coloring again, her legs swinging slightly under the chair. Monica stood at the stove, moving between a pan and a cup of coffee. There was a knock. Monica glanced toward the door. "Annie, stay there." "I am." Monica walked to the door and opened it. She paused. Ethan stood there, looking very different from the night before. Cleaner, more composed, but not untouched by what had happened. "Morning," he said. Monica studied him. "You're standing better." "I am." "That's a good sign." There was a brief silence. Then Annie's voice came from inside. "Mama." "Who is it?" Ethan smiled slightly. "It's me." Annie appeared in the hallway, then ran forward a few steps before stopping suddenly, like she remembered she wasn't supposed to rush strangers. "You came back," she said. "I said I would remember," Ethan replied. She nodded, satisfied. "Good." Monica stepped aside, just enough to let him in. "You don't look like someone who forgot overnight." "I didn't," he said. He stepped into the house again. It felt the same. Warm, uneven, real. Annie looked up at him. "You didn't sleep on any sidewalks, right?" Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "No, ma'am." "Good." He looked at her, then at Monica. "I came to say thank you," he said, properly this time. Monica leaned against the doorframe. "You already said it." "I know," he replied. "But I think I'm just starting to understand it." Annie tilted her head. What does that mean? Ethan crouched slightly, careful with his body, bringing himself closer to her height. It means, he said gently, I didn't just open my eyes last night. Annie watched him closely. I think, he continued, I'm still opening them now. Annie smiled, and this time, Monica did too. Ethan remained crouched for a moment longer than necessary, not because his body demanded it, but because he wasn't quite ready to stand back up into the version of himself that usually filled a room. Annie stood in front of him, still holding a crayon in one hand, watching him with the same steady attention she had given him on the sidewalk. You look different, she said. He smiled slightly. That's the second time I've heard that. It's true, Annie replied, as if facts didn't need explanation. Monica moved back toward the kitchen, though she kept them both in view. Coffee? She asked. Not warmly, not coldly, just plainly. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, thank you. That's new too, Monica said under her breath as she reached for a cup. Annie climbed back onto her chair and slid her coloring paper a little to the side. You want to see what I'm drawing? Ethan stood slowly, careful with his balance, and walked over. Sure, he looked down. It was a simple drawing. A sidewalk. A small stick figure with big round eyes, and another figure lying on the ground. The colors were uneven, the lines a little shaky, but the meaning was clear. That's you, Annie said, pointing at the one on the ground. I figured, he replied. And that's me, she added, tapping the smaller figure. Ethan nodded. You got the important parts right. Annie looked up at him. You didn't close your eyes this time. He shook his head. No. Good. Monica placed the cup on the table near him. Careful. It's hot. Thanks. He wrapped his hands around it, feeling the warmth settle into his fingers. It wasn't just the heat. It was the way it was handed to him. Not like a service. Not like something expected. Just something given. You came back quick, Monica said. I didn't want to wait, Ethan answered. For what? He looked at her, then at Annie, then back at the cup in his hands. For things to go back to normal. Monica leaned slightly against the counter. And what's wrong with normal? He let out a quiet breath. I think I've been calling something normal that isn't complete. Annie blinked. That sounds confusing. It is, he admitted. I'm still figuring it out. Monica studied him for a second longer. So what does figuring it out look like? Ethan set the cup down gently. It starts with not pretending last night didn't matter. And after that, he hesitated. After that, I do something about it. Annie perked up. Like what? He looked at her, then smiled faintly. I don't have all the answers yet. That's okay, she said. You didn't have all the answers yesterday either. He nodded. Fair point. There was a quiet moment where no one rushed to fill the space. The morning light came through the window, softer than before, settling across the small table and the scattered crayons. Monica broke the silence. People like you don't usually come back without a reason. Ethan didn't look offended. I know. So what's yours? He met her eyes. Gratitude. She held his gaze. That's a word, not a reason. He nodded slowly. Then maybe the reason is, I don't want this to be the only time I see things clearly. Monica didn't answer immediately. Annie did. You can come back again, she said. You don't gotta fall down to do it. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. I'll remember that. Annie leaned forward slightly. And you can help people too. He raised an eyebrow. Like how? She shrugged. However you want. You're big. Monica almost smiled at that. Ethan thought about it, really thought this time. Not in the way he usually processed decisions, no numbers, no strategy, no outcome charts. Just a simple idea, placed in front of him by a 6-year-old who didn't see limits the way adults did. Yeah, he said slowly. Maybe I can. Monica stepped closer now, her tone still steady but less guarded than before. Helping people isn't the same as fixing things with money. I know. Do you? She asked. He didn't rush the answer. I'm starting to. That was enough for now. Annie picked up her crayon again. You can start by not being dumb. Ethan blinked. That's a strong opening step. You walked home drunk, she said plainly. That was dumb. Monica shook her head lightly. She's not wrong. Ethan held up his hand slightly. All right. Lesson learned. Annie nodded, satisfied, and went back to coloring. Ethan looked around the room again. The same details, the same quiet life that had nothing to prove to anyone. But this time, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. He felt included. Not because he belonged there, but because they let him stay. I should probably go, he said after a while. Annie looked up immediately. You coming back? He smiled. Yeah, I think I will. Monica crossed her arms again, but there was no edge to it now. Then next time, you knock like a normal person. I did knock. You showed up like a story, she corrected. He nodded. Fair enough. He stepped toward the door, slower than before, but steadier. Before he left, Annie called out, Hey. He turned. She pointed at him again, serious in the way only a child could be. Keep your eyes open. Ethan held her gaze. I will. This time, it wasn't about staying awake, and all three of them knew it. Ethan didn't go straight home. He sat in the car for a few minutes after the door closed behind him, the small house still visible through the window. Annie had already gone back inside, but for some reason, he kept expecting her to run back out and remind him one more time. Keep your eyes open. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. Sir? Ethan leaned back slowly. Give me a minute. Yes, sir. The engine idled softly. Outside, the neighborhood moved at its own pace. Someone walking a dog, a car passing slowly, a distant radio playing through an open window. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded attention. Ethan stared at it all like it was something new, not new in existence, new in importance. After a while, he spoke again. Drive. Where to, sir? Ethan hesitated. For years, that question had always had an immediate answer. Office. Meeting. Site visit. Airport. Somewhere that connected to something larger. Something measurable. Now, for the first time in a long time, he didn't have one ready. Downtown, he said finally. Office. The car pulled away. The city rose around him again, glass buildings, clean lines, movement controlled and efficient. It all looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. When the car stopped in front of his building, people were already waiting. His assistant, a couple of executives, a man with a tablet in his hand, already scrolling through updates before Ethan even stepped out. Mr. Cole, we've been trying to reach you, his assistant said quickly as he approached. There are several decisions pending. Ethan raised a hand, not sharply, just enough. I know, he said. They followed him inside, still talking, still moving at the speed they were used to. Meetings, numbers, projections, timelines, everything stacking up like it always did, but Ethan didn't respond right away. He walked into the conference room, stopped at the head of the table, then looked at the large screen already filled with plans and figures. For a moment, he just stood there. Mr. Cole? Someone prompted. Ethan blinked once, then pulled out a chair and sat down. Start again, he said. The room went quiet. Sir? Start again, he repeated. From the beginning, not the numbers, the place. There was a pause. One of the executives exchanged a glance with another. We've already covered the overview. I don't want the overview, Ethan said calmly. I want to know what it actually is. Another silence. Finally, someone cleared their throat. It's a redevelopment zone. Underutilized land. Ethan looked up. Who lives there? He asked. The question landed wrong. Not aggressive, just unfamiliar. The executive hesitated. Primarily lower. Income residents. Mixed ownership. Some rental. Names, Ethan said. Excuse me? People, he clarified. Not categories. No one answered immediately. Ethan leaned back slightly, the soreness in his body reminding him again of the sidewalk, the fall, the cold. The difference. He exhaled slowly. We've been talking about places like they're empty, he said. They're not. His assistant shifted slightly. Sir, are you suggesting we delay the project? Ethan didn't answer that directly. Instead, he asked, has anyone here actually been there? Silence. That was answer enough. Ethan nodded once. All right. He stood up again. Slower this time, but steady. We're not making any decisions today, he said. The room stirred. But, no, he said, still calm. We're going to see it first. Sir, with respect. That's not how we usually— I know how we usually do it, Ethan interrupted, not raising his voice. That's the problem. That stopped them. For the first time, no one tried to correct him. No one tried to move the conversation back to where it had been. Ethan looked around the room, meeting each of their eyes briefly. Set it up, he said. We go there, we walk it, we talk to people, then we decide. And if it changes things? Someone asked. Ethan paused. Then he said simply, then it changes things. Back in the small house across the city, Annie sat at the table again. Her drawing from earlier now filled with more color. The sidewalk had turned bright blue for some reason, and the two figures had grown slightly larger, more detailed. Monica watched from the kitchen. You thinking about him? She asked. Annie didn't look up. A little. Monica leaned against the counter. What about? Annie added another line to the drawing, then said, I think he's trying. Monica considered that. You think so? Annie nodded. He came back. That's a start, Monica said. Annie looked up then. Do you think he'll forget? Monica didn't answer right away. She had seen people forget before. Seen good intentions fade once comfort returned. Seen moments like that disappear into routines that didn't leave space for them. But she had also seen something else. Sometimes, not today, she said finally. Annie smiled a little and went back to coloring. Across the city, in a glass building full of decisions that shaped places Annie would never see on a map, Ethan Cole stood in a room full of people who were waiting for him to return to normal. He didn't. Not completely, because somewhere between a cold sidewalk and a small living room, a 6-year-old girl had refused to let him close his eyes. And now, for the first time in years, he was actually looking. The visit was scheduled for the next morning. Not announced, not public. No press, no cameras, no polished statements prepared in advance. Just a quiet entry on Ethan's calendar that most people in his office didn't quite understand. Site walkthrough, his assistant had labeled it, but it wasn't just that. By mid-morning, Ethan stood at the edge of the same neighborhood he had driven through the day before, only now he was on foot. The buildings looked older in daylight, the details clearer, paint chipped in places, windows repaired in different ways, signs of people fixing what they could with what they had. His team stood a few steps behind him, dressed too sharply for the setting, their presence already drawing curious looks from residents passing by. Sir, we can start with the North Block, one of them suggested. That's where the primary redevelopment. Ethan didn't move. Instead, he watched a woman across the street help a child adjust a backpack before sending him off toward the corner. He watched a man sweeping the front of a small store. Slow, deliberate strokes like it mattered how clean the ground looked even if no one else noticed. Give me a minute, Ethan said. His assistant hesitated. Sir, we have a schedule. I know, Ethan replied. He stepped forward, not toward the outlined redevelopment zone, toward the sidewalk, the same kind of sidewalk he had been lying on less than 24 hours earlier. Mr. Cole, another voice called, cautious. We should stay together. Ethan glanced back. Then walk with me. They followed, not comfortably, not confidently, but they followed. A few residents looked up as the group passed. Some curious, some wary, one or two already guarded. The way people become when they sense decisions are being made about their lives without them. Ethan noticed that. He slowed his pace. Excuse me, he said, approaching the man sweeping the storefront. The man paused, leaning slightly on the broom. Yeah? Ethan hesitated for just a fraction of a second, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he knew this moment mattered more than most conversations he'd had in years. How long have you been here? He asked. The man looked at him, measuring. Long enough. Ethan nodded. What's changed? The man let out a small breath. Depends who's asking. Ethan didn't look away. Someone who's trying to understand before he makes a mistake. That answer shifted something. Not trust. Not yet. But attention. The man tapped the broom lightly against the ground. Things always changing, he said. Rent goes up, people move out, new folks come in. Then they don't stay long either. Why not? The man gave a small shrug. Because it stops feeling like theirs. Ethan absorbed that. Behind him, One of the executives shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of place in a conversation that didn't revolve around projections. Ethan asked another question. What would make it feel like yours again? The man looked at him longer this time. You planning something here? Ethan didn't dodge it. Yes. The man nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer. Then you already know it ain't about buildings. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Then what is it about? He asked. The man pointed the broom lightly at the ground. People. Same as anywhere else. The words landed harder than any report. Ethan nodded once. Thank you. He stepped back. His team immediately leaned in. Sir, we can incorporate community feedback into the proposal. Ethan raised a hand. Not to stop them, just to slow them. We're not incorporating anything yet, he said. We're listening. They didn't argue. Not this time. A little further down the block, a group of kids played near a chain-link fence, their laughter cutting through the quiet tension of the adults nearby. One of them tripped, fell, then got back up again without hesitation. Ethan watched that longer than he expected. Sir? His assistant prompted. Ethan turned. We're not rushing this. Understood. But the tone had changed. Not resistant anymore. Just uncertain. Hours later, the group returned to the office, but the room felt different than it had the day before. The same screens, the same data, the same plans. But now, something didn't fit as neatly. Ethan stood at the head of the table again, looking at the projection. This doesn't work, he said. The room stilled. Sir? It's incomplete, he clarified. It solves space, not people. One of the executives leaned forward. We can revise the model. No, Ethan said. We rethink it. That will delay everything. Ethan met his eyes. Then it delays everything. Silence. Real silence this time. Not hesitation. Recognition. Because they could see it. He wasn't reacting. He was deciding. Back in the small house, Annie sat on the floor this time, her drawing spread out in front of her. She had added something new. A second house. Monica noticed it immediately. What's that? Annie looked up. His house. Monica raised an eyebrow. You've never seen his house. I know, Annie said, but I think it's big. That's a safe guess. Annie nodded. But I don't think it's warm like ours. Monica paused. That answer carried more weight than Annie realized. Maybe not, she said. Annie picked up a crayon and drew a line connecting the two houses. Monica watched that. What's that line for? She asked. Annie smiled slightly. So he doesn't forget how to come back. Monica didn't say anything, but for the first time since that night, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't. The story reminds us that true humanity is revealed not in moments of comfort, but in moments of need. A little girl with nothing but kindness and courage was able to see what a powerful man had long ignored, that every person, regardless of status, can be vulnerable and in need of compassion. Wealth, success, and control mean very little if we lose the ability to see others as human beings. Sometimes, it takes a simple act of care from the most unexpected place to open our eyes. And once they are open, the real challenge is not just to see the truth but to live differently because of it. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only,